Hey guys, Icy here. So I've been wanting to do a tier list video for PvP healers for a while now, but I wanted to make sure I played all 6 classes so I could get a feel for how they compare to each other. And for the sake of Sawman UK, I did do a ton of research on what a tier list even is. I also watched a video explaining what is a tier list, and I even found out what the S in S tier is all about. Be sure to check the links in the description below to give these references a watch and a read. Now, because tier lists are subjective, I'm going to rank the classes based on how their class kits fit into my criteria on what I believe are fundamentally important for PvP healing: ground hots, burst heals, cleanses, stamina sustain, and versatility. Timestamps will be in the description below, so let's begin. For ground hots, I love stacking them together, and in fights people tend to fight in their own little areas, so it's very helpful to layer 2 if not 3 hots on the ground throughout combat. This rating is going to be based on which classes have ground hots that can stack well with illustrious healing. I gave the Warden and Necro an S rating because both of their morphs pair well with illustrious healing. The Warden ranks higher than the Necro because the Necro is dependent on corpses to trigger that heal over time. Now, this usually isn't an issue, but without the corpse on the ground to consume, this is just an AoE ground burst heal. And the other reason why they're both in S tier is because of their capability of being a secondary support. If there were 2 Wardens or 2 Necro healers in the group, you don't want both of them running the same morphs of their abilities. More variety is always better. In the A tier, I've placed the Nightblade, Templar, and DK because they only have one morph that is a ground hot. I'd actually give the Nightblade and Templar an A+ rating because the Major Expedition from the Nightblade's Refreshing Path and the Templar's Purify synergy are both really useful in PvP. And for the DK, I'd give an A- because the radius of Cinderstorm is really small, even though the heal over time, duration, and snare are really good. And finally, the Sork I placed in the B tier, or the lowest rating, because they don't have any ground hots in their kit. I did test out illustrious healing stacked with either Liquid Lightning or Daedric Tomb, but it honestly just didn't feel right. If you've seen any of my Sork videos, you'll see me using Echoing Vigor instead, which I found works well as a nice alternative. Now, burst heals are very important. While hots are topping you off throughout the fight, the burst heal is typically for those emergency situations when either yourself or your ally gets bursted and you need to recover as quickly as you can. Oftentimes in BGs, it's almost like sharks smelling blood in the water. As soon as someone gets low, everyone's going to dump on that target, so the sooner you can recover, the better off you'll be. For the S tier category, I place the Templar, Nightblade, and Necro because I always feel confident when using either of their burst heals. If I was going to put them in the correct order, I'd probably put the Templar in front because of the Magicka refund that comes with Honor of the Dead ability when you heal targets below 75%, which pretty much allows you to spam it without an issue. Then I'd put the Nightblade above the Necro. Yes, they both get more healing on the second cast. The Nightblade gets minor mending from casting Healthy Offering, and the Necro gets the Curative Curse bonus because of the self-inflicted minor defile from resistant flesh, and the Necro also grants the target resistances when they're healed. However, the range is more important to me. Both the Templar and Nightblade have 28 meter conal radius, whereas the Necro has a small conal area, and that's why the Necro gets ranked 3rd. In the A tier, I have the Warden. The Warden's Polar Winds burst heal is really nice because it will heal both yourself and your ally. However, it has a small radius of only 12 meters. The Warden's Bursting Vines gets an honorable mention because it is a legit burst heal for an ally. However, the burst heal needs to also affect myself, which is why it gets ranked in A tier. And for my playstyle in BGs, it doesn't have a place on my bar, only when I go to Cyrodiil. Now, the Sork's Twilight Matriarch I placed in B tier for 3 particular reasons, even though we all know it's OP. 1, it's a pet that can be killed, which consequently makes it so that you don't have a burst heal anymore. 2, it requires you to have the Matriarch double barred, so you are forced to waste a slot for it. And 3, it's not conal, so you cannot aim it at an ally. You kind of just need to hope you're in range of your ally when they need you. And of course, Power Surge does get an honorable mention because this acts as a passive AoE burst heal around yourself every 3 seconds whenever you do a crit heal. For the bottom tier, or the C tier, I placed the DK because the burst heal just makes me so frustrated. It's the only class that I technically have to run 2 burst heals: Coagulating Blood, which is for myself, and Cauterize, which I use for everybody else. I wish I could only use Cauterize, but it's just not strong enough in an emergency situation to heal myself when compared to Coagulating Blood. Hell, it's not even strong enough to heal an ally sometimes. Now, I did not forget about Obsidian Shard because this heal is technically on par with things like Honor of the Dead, Bursting Vines, Healthy Offering, etc. But The problem with this heal, you have to actually hit an enemy for it to heal yourself or an ally, which, yeah, it may sound cool, but it's just not effective in practice. A lot of the times enemies are dodging a lot in BGs, so you can actually miss your heal, which just sounds absurd to me, and it's not cheap. The thing costs 4,000 magicka. And yeah, throwing rocks at an enemy that's trying to kill an ally sounds nice, but what about myself? It's just not practical to throw rocks at the guy who's giving you the beatdown. In my honest opinion, I'm gonna go on a small rant here, if they wanted to make DK healers legit, they just need an effective burst heal. My recommendation, just change the name from Obsidian Shard to Obsidian Shards, plural, and make it the same animation as the Nightblade's burst heal, and it'll function similar to the Necro's burst heal, where instead of giving the individual resistances, they get a damage shield for half the amount healed. And I only mention damage shields because the DK class kit, it's all about giving shields to everybody when you have abilities like Fragmented Shield, Magma Armor, that type of stuff. Now, cleanses are also very important. Having a high uptime on debuffs is never an issue in PvP, and some of those debuffs could certainly earn a cleanse, like the major and minor breaches. I will mention that with the introduction of Plague Break, you do have to be careful with cleansing yourself, because if you cleanse or you just die while you're surrounded by a group of people, the explosion will amplify per person and do a ton of damage. If you've ever been hit with a 25k Plague Break, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, comment below if you've ever been hit with a Plague Break that was higher than 25k. The Templar and Necro I have placed in the S tier because they have group cleanse mechanics. The Templar can provide the Purify synergy through the Ritual of Retribution or Extended Ritual ability that will cleanse all debuffs on your ally on activation. It will also cleanse up to 5 debuffs from yourself, and I know personally I'm always grateful when I get that Purify synergy in BGs. The Necro is ranked second because the Renewing Undeath ability requires a corpse to activate the cleanse, which usually isn't an issue in BGs, and it can only cleanse up to 3 debuffs per ally, so it can cleanse 3 debuffs on multiple people at once. I'll make an honorable mention for the Necro's Expunge and Modify ability, which can function as a self-cleanse to potentially restore resources if needed. In the A tier, I've placed the Warden because the Bull Netch or Betty Netch is a self-cleanse that can automatically only cleanse 1 debuff every 5 seconds. Now, this is a free ability, and you can recast this multiple times to remove 1 debuff per cast. It definitely comes in handy when you're not too busy or you're a bit pressured on your back bar. And in the bottom tier, B, C, D, F, whatever, is the Sorc, DK, and Nightblade, simply because they don't have any cleanses in their class kits. If you wanted to equip them with cleanses, you can utilize Curse Eater or Stendarr's Embrace. Stendarr's Embrace will work on any of the classes, no problem, but with Curse Eater, you do have to be careful and find out what abilities can actually proc this set beforehand. Now, stamina sustain is very important to me. Blocking provides a huge amount of damage mitigation, which is why I make my builds reliant on block casting and why I utilize a 7 sturdy setup. The Warden and Templar get placed in the S tier for stamina sustain because both the Bull Netch and Restoring Focus can restore stamina while blocking, which is very important to me. The Warden is ranked first because the Bull Netch is free, provides major brutality and sorcery, and can cleanse 1 debuff from yourself, which can be recast infinitely. The Templar uses Restoring Focus, which costs 862 stamina, which really isn't a big deal, and also provides you with major resolve. You can't spam it like you can with the Warden, and there's no reason to. However, if you let this skill come off cooldown, then you also lose your armor buff, which is extremely important in PvP. If you let the Bull Netch drop off, it's not a big deal. You're not really going to die because of it. And for the Templar, it's not that it will happen, it's more that it could happen, which is why I placed the Templar in second place. In the A tier, I've placed the Necro and DK. The Necro is above the DK because the Undead Confederate passive, which grants you stamina recovery when you have your Spearmender active, and the DK doesn't really have any solid forms of stamina sustain that we can benefit from as a PvP healer. We're not using poison abilities, so we cannot get stamina back that way. We do use Earth and Heart abilities like Cinderstorm, so we do get a little bit of stamina back every so often, and when we use our ultimate, we do get a bunch of resources back on magicka health and stamina because of that Battle Roar passive. In the B tier or the lowest tier, I've placed the Nightblade and Sorc because of how my loadouts are constructed for PvP healing. When you look at the other classes, their forms of stamina sustain fit naturally in my loadouts, whereas with the Nightblade and Sorc, they do not. Again, there's nothing wrong with Leeching Strikes and Dark Deal, they just don't have a place in my loadout, and therefore they get placed at the bottom. Okay, so just a quick rankings update for all of the sections. Here's what we have. And when you add these up, the lowest total having the highest rank, the Templars in first, followed by the Warden, Necro, Nightblade, DK, and Sork. This is actually pretty accurate on what my personal overall tier list ranking would be for PvP healers. I'd probably just swap the Sork with the DK because Negate and Streak are OP, and the only real change I would make here is swapping the Templar into second and the Warden into first. And now let me explain why I think the Warden is best in slot for PvP healing with our final criteria: versatility. The Warden's kit is super strong when it comes to facing certain opponents or wanting to play different styles. Passively, just healing anyone grants them minor toughness, and whenever you cast your armor buff, if they are next to you, they also get major resolve, which is helpful if someone forgets to maintain their armor buff in a fight. If you're going against multiple Sorks, the Warden has the Shimmering Shield ability, which can absorb projectiles, return magicka to yourself, and grant you major heroism. If you've seen any of my videos, you know I'm a big fan of Snow Treaders, and because of that, the Warden can actually run Deceptive Predator, which gives major expedition and a slottable minor evasion. With all the other classes, I have to keep using Race Against Time. I'm also a big fan of trying new sets that change my loadout a bit, like using Mighty Chudons. As an example, this would allow me to remove Ice Fortress and then slot in Lotus Blossom. So I'll still have two buffs to upkeep in a BG, the Bullnetch and the Lotus Blossom, but now I have a new ability to help my team with. And if I was to do this on the Templar, I'd be removing my form of Stamina Sustain, which would then place the class lower on the Stamina Sustain rankings. For ultimates, the Enchanted Forest is the only class ultimate that I would prefer to use on my front bar. It's very low cost and I treat it as a spammable, which makes for a nice third potential ground hot. And lastly, the Warden has a ton of abilities in the class that you can utilize for your team. If you want debuffs on the enemy, you have Off Balance, Major Breach, Major Defile, Major Maim, Minor Vulnerability, Minor Lifesteal. You have all forms of crowd control, AoE snares, immobilizations, and stuns. You have buffs for your team: Major Resolve, Minor Toughness, Major Protection, Minor Endurance, Minor Intellect. You have buffs for yourself: Major Resolve, Major Protection, Major Prophecy, Major Brutality and Sorcery, Minor Toughness, Minor Evasion, Minor Endurance, Minor Intellect. If you want to do a pet build, yep. If you want to be a stamina healer, yes. Elsa the Snow Queen, yes. Spider-Man, yes. Damn! Alright, so that is my PvP healer tier list rankings. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. See ya.